In this section, I'm going to build on what I just said in the section before, and we'll spend the rest of the module looking at strategic planning in what I and others call simple contexts. Now, calling it simple does not mean that it's not important or easy, but you'll see what I mean. The idea of simple, complicated, and complex situations, problems, environments, and systems comes from the work of Brenda Zimmerman and her colleagues in their recent easy-to-read book, Getting to Maybe, which I would highly recommend. The complete framework is too involved to discuss here in this introductory module. However, I will give you the general ideas. In this approach to understanding the world, some systems are simple, meaning changing them is fairly straightforward, and they are amenable to what I would call traditional strategic planning approaches. Zimmerman and her colleagues used the example of baking a cake. The planning process for baking a cake is simple. It's called a recipe. If you follow the instructions to the letter, adding ingredients at the right time and baking it at the right temperature for the right amount of time, you will be guaranteed a good tasting cake at the end of the process. And the next time you follow the recipe, the results should be equally tasty. In a simple system, there's a clear cause and effect within a short time span, and the results are highly predictable. In complicated situations, you need experts to assist you because of the technical knowledge required to make sure that everything fits together and works perfectly. As you can see in the movie about the Apollo 13 moon mission, getting to the moon can be calamitous even if one small part among millions malfunctions. In both simple and complicated situations and systems, however, it is possible to know the detailed outcome of the planning process in advance. In complex systems and contexts, however, it's impossible to know in advance what the outcome will be. You only know in retrospect, after the fact, what happened. Think about Zimmerman and colleagues' example of raising a child. While some parents try to get their children into the right daycare so that they will be accepted to Harvard, how often is that really predictable? Dave Snowden, a planning theorist from Wales, relates how he commanded a group of highly trained military officers to plan and execute a kindergarten birthday party, complete with objectives and expected outcomes. As you might imagine, at the end of an hour, these men and women were reduced to tears over their failure to accomplish the mission. Of course, there's a lot more detail, but for this exercise, we'll stick with planning in a simple context, as that is what most people are familiar with and expect. And this traditional way of doing planning is the one most organizations continue to use. In summary, how do you know if the system is simple? If you can map clear causality, that is to say, if you do this, then that will occur, and the situation is highly predictable, you are probably dealing with a simple system in a predictable environment. The diagram in this slide says if the program theory is clearly definable, it's probably a simple system. By program theory, I mean if you do strategies 1, 2, and 3, then you will get predictable results, much like baking a cake, as we discussed earlier. Another way of looking at simple contexts, again from evaluation theory, is determining whether what's called a pipeline logic model works. If it does, again, it's probably a simple system. You can see the causal arrows between the boxes in the model where inputs lead to outputs, which in turn lead to outcomes and impact. This is what I mean by cause and effect. This is where strategic planning shares theory and methodology with contemporary evaluation. So this is a brief advertisement for taking one of the evaluation modules through the Arizona Public Health Training Center to complement this one about planning. This slide shows an example of a detailed logic model for a smoking cessation program. For broad, long-term strategic planning, you would probably not be this detailed in your logic model. However, paying attention to the expected sequence of events is important.